I'll call this meeting to order. I'd like to thank the officials from Department of Fisheries and Oceans for joining us again this morning. And you probably are aware that we'll probably be interrupted by some bells here very soon. So anyhow, we'll proceed right into questions at this point in time. Who's 7 minutes. 7 minutes. We'll start off with concern.
John.
Thank you. All right, we'll start off with a 7-minute round with Mr. Weston leading off.
Merci, Mr. President, and thank you for joining us, our guest this morning. I'm especially pleased to have the chance to ask questions because from the province I come and from the riding I represent, there's a high degree of importance placed on fisheries and the environment. And we have a group of community-minded volunteers in my riding who call themselves the Sea to Sky Fisheries Roundtable, who've been actively involved, volunteers, very well acquainted with fisheries issues, about a dozen people who include people like former Fisheries Minister John Fraser and David Brown and John Barker, who heads up Streamkeepers in West Vancouver. And they have participated with me in various fisheries-related things over the 4 years since I was first elected, among other things, calling for some sort of inquiry into the missing sockeye salmon and encouraging our committee to investigate aquaculture issues and working with officials in the department to build a wonderful salmon spawning viewing platform in the Squamish area. So they're very engaged, and they've raised the following 3 issues. I'm going to ask 3 questions and hope that you have time to deal with them. Firstly, they have supported measures to increase the portion of salmon stamp revenues that are sold on tidal fishing licenses so that those revenues come back into the Pacific region and towards funding salmon initiatives. And it would be good to hear what our department's response is to that. The second thing raised previously, changes to Bill C-38 and the effect on fish habitat. We've heard how there is an active consultation process, and this was asked by the parliamentary secretary in the previous meeting. I would like to hear how meetings like the ones our roundtable had are being incorporated into the process of defining those regulations. How is this process working, and how can people track how their participation makes a difference? And then thirdly, the consolidation of DFO offices. It's being depicted as something that will enhance effectiveness, but there are concerns that it really results in a loss of DFO officers, including in the riding I represent. So I would love to hear your responses.
So do you want to take the stand?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. So I'm going to respond to the question concerning the Pacific salmon stamp, and others will speak to others of your questions. We've had in place for a number of years an arrangement through which a portion of the proceeds of the salmon conservation stamp support a contribution that the department provides to the Pacific Salmon Foundation. And there have been proposals that have come forward to our minister to consider the possibility of increasing the percentage of the proceeds of the stamp that could contribute to that contribution, and that is something that's under consideration, but it's obviously a matter for a budget, and because the revenue that comes from the stamp is contributed into the Consolidated Revenue Fund, and so that would mean that there'd have to be a decision taken at the level of government as to whether or not to change that arrangement.
Okay.
With respect to the other 2 questions, one on fish habitat and second regarding our DFO offices, I guess there's an awful lot of information to convey there, and I won't speak until until 11:19 in responding. The first, I guess, with respect to fish habitat, in terms of how consultations, both the ones that you refer to and others, are sort of finding their way into the process. I guess I would describe it as a somewhat organic process. It's very difficult to say, we heard this, this, and this in meeting X, Y, Z, and you can directly translate that into a legislative text or a policy outcome and so on. I'm sure you can appreciate that the process is a little more circuitous, so to speak, than that. But the advice and input that we received, both from the roundtable to which you refer and a number of others that I believe Mr. Camp held over the course of the summer last year and early fall, if memory serves, as well as dialogue that we've had, as we described in a sort of a list and a chart table with this committee in November, has allowed us to think through our policy inputs and our policy development activities fairly carefully. We've had quite a variety of input from around the country, most of which I would say is verbal. So we don't have something that's an extensive document record that we could say, here's what we've heard from all of these people. We don't have a means of cataloging and playing that back to individuals, but we have had quite a variety of inputs, not only from the roundtable type process to which you refer, but also from conservation organizations, from industry groups. We've had a little bit from universities. As I say, most of the dialogue has been fairly informal in nature, in the sense that it hasn't taken place in large formalized workshops, but much more in a bilateral conversation sense. We are taking all of that, distilling it, and using it to bring forward over the course of the next 4 or 5 months a series of policy documents, which we will ask people for their views on. We have a set of questions that we're planning to use in that regard. We also have, as I mentioned here on Tuesday, or across the hall I should say, work is underway to develop a regulation that will set out the information requirements we will have of project proponents, and to set timelines by which the department will have to make decisions with respect to those proposals. That regulatory process will follow the normal one insofar as consultations are concerned. The regulation, in terms of when it actually gets released, that's a determination of the government. Most of the preparatory work on that is now complete, and it'll be a matter of the government's regulatory agenda and timing. So I'd suggest that sort of summarizes where we are with respect to the consultation element. With respect to the consolidation of DFO offices, I'd say 2 things first. Most importantly, whilst we talk about the consolidation of offices, what we probably should be more focused on using is consolidation of the program previously referred to as the Habitat Program, Fisheries Protection Program now. We are moving people from 68 offices down to approximately 15. That doesn't mean the offices in which they are located necessarily close. Most of our offices have staff from the Small Craft Harbors Program, the Habitat Program, fish management, etc., fisheries officers, and so on. So many of the physical office, if you will, that we're speaking about will remain open. The people who previously worked in the Habitat Program will be consolidated from approximately 68 locations to 15. We're quite confident that in so doing, the program will become far more efficient. Decision-making controls and procedures will become tighter and more focused. Our ability to consolidate experts alongside each other rather than in a highly distributed network will substantially increase. And our ability to make sure that the department's resources are focused on key priorities, key issues, key habitat concerns will substantially go up. We will have a smaller physical footprint from the point of view of the Habitat Program, but in this day and age, the requirement to be physically on site is dramatically less than what it once was, and we do think that we'll be at a point where we'll consolidate the focus.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chisholm.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and to the officials from Department of Fisheries and Oceans who are here. I want to begin by making the point that I did on Tuesday when the Minister was here, that we have a great deal of concern of the fact that the mains and the sups are before us before we've seen any plan, the priorities and plan, the plan and priorities from report from the department. We think that's getting the cart before the horse, and we would certainly expect that once those plans are tabled, that we will then have an opportunity to to further complete our analysis of these documents and hopefully invite you back. in order to finish that up before we're asked to vote on these on those mains. So I make that point first. In terms of the habitat program, let me ask you this. The Commissioner of the Environment in his fall report raised concerns over the Department's understanding of some of the changes to the Fisheries Act that that we've talked about on many occasions. And I quote from the report, "Departmental officials told us the DFO has not yet fully determined the impact of these amendments coming into force or the impact of the policy changes. In particular, the question of HAD was raised, and whether the question of whether this policy remains in place after the changes to the Fisheries Act. That kind of gets to, I think, what you were just referring to. So, could you respond, please, to what the Commissioner had to say in terms of what your understanding is of the impact of the changes that will be made by these amendments?
Thanks. I think that a couple of things, I guess, insofar as the specific reference that you made to HAD, I would indicate or emphasize rather that the Act still will require authorizations, or still authorize authorizations, I guess is another way to put it. They will no longer be called HADs. We will for sure come up with another acronym because we're very good at that. But it will be something that will constitute a serious harm authorization of some kind, because that's the term in the new prohibition. So at some point there will be authorizations that will come forward that will say we've determined that project XYZ may proceed with the following conditions and so on, and that would be the nature of the authorization. So insofar as whether or not authorizations of the nature people are familiar with in the HAD context will continue, the answer is yes. The terminology will vary a little bit. The manner in which they're put forward will vary a little bit. Importantly, a significant difference, though, with respect specifically again to the authorizations, is that the conditions attached to those authorizations will now be much more enforceable. Whereas before, a fishery officer would have been required to identify a violation, and as the violation or if a charge proceeded through the court process, would have been required to demonstrate that the activity in question caused harm to habitat. We will no longer be required to do that. Essentially, we will now be required to demonstrate that the condition on the authorization was violated. End of discussion. So they are enforceable conditions which will substantially, in our view at least, improve our ability to enforce the terms of the Act and specifically the authorizations. Now, to go back to your broader question about have we fully interpreted the impact of every clause of the Act and so on, of course, the process is only recently completed in terms of the legislative history. I think that no bureaucrat would sit before a committee of this nature and say, don't worry, we've figured out every single element of it. We just don't have that level of hubris, I don't think. I think that we're certainly at a point where we've worked through, to the best of our understanding, the implications of the change. We're proceeding to organize ourselves in such a way to deliver upon the new program. We've got an awful lot of work to do in terms of policy design, and it ranges from the picayune, very, very detailed questions about how do you define certain things. We have to put new forms in place for applications, that kind of stuff, through to broader questions about how we'll action some of the new provisions with respect to partnerships, with respect to offsets, a whole variety of things. So I wouldn't want you to draw the conclusion that we have no idea where we're going. I think we've got our act together reasonably well in terms of our next few steps. But I think that the community collectively is still going to have a lot of work to do.
Thank you. I appreciate your candor, your frankness. Nobody would expect with these kind of significant changes, I don't think, that that you would be able to make that kind of commitment. In terms of hubris, we see all kinds of that already coming from government members, not necessarily on this committee, but there have been times. In terms of what these changes do and won't do, so I think you're okay in saying that you don't need to bring any with you. The whole question of the precautionary principle is something that was raised quite a bit in the Commissioner Cohen's report, in particularly the responsibility of the department to be able to protect fish habitat. And I know that now it's not about protecting habitat; it's about protecting fish. And I wonder, I'm going to ask you this in two parts. One is that the funding for sustainable aquaculture program is down $17 million, and I want to ask you why. But the second part of that is the ability of the department to ensure, in the case, for example, of aquaculture, finfish aquaculture, to protect wild stocks, whether they be salmon or they be crustaceans, or mackerel or herring or whatever. Would you comment, please, on the ability of the department as a result of the changes, both in terms of resources and in terms of legislation, the ability of the department to ensure that our wild stocks of salmon, crustaceans, our herring and so on, mackerel, are in fact going to be protected by the Department of Fisheries and Oceans officials?
Before I respond, may I just make sure I understood the first part of your question? I had a little problem hearing you. You asked a question about the Sustainable Aquaculture Program and the $17 million, and then I didn't catch the specific question on that.
Oh, that was just note. That was noted that that the funding for that program is down $17 million, and my question was why, and I wanted to link it with your ability to protect the traditional stocks, and whether they're tied, or maybe you could. That's why I presented those together.
Okay. With respect to the question specifically on that component of it, as my colleague, the Chief Financial Officer, explained here on Tuesday, we have a number of sunsetting programs. The Sustainable Aquaculture Program is one of them. If the government chooses not to renew it, it will drop by the amount that you suggested, and that will have an impact on our programs. We will be in a position where we will have to figure out alternate ways of delivering some of what we do under that program, and obviously some of it will cease. The government will choose shortly what programs it will fund and those it won't. With respect to the resources available to us now and what we reasonably foresee to continue, again, I'd echo some of the comments I just made a minute ago. I'd be very surprised if any government official came before you and said, "Don't worry, we've got enough money, please don't send us any more."
So I have to interrupt. As per the standing rules, when the bells start to ring, it is our obligation to suspend our hearing. I believe there is unanimous consent to continue for 15 more minutes. Is that correct? We have unanimous consent, so we'll continue for 15 more minutes, and then members will have to return to the House. Mr. Chisholm, I have to hold up. You're well over your time on this question. This question we're at 8.5 minutes.
Really?
Yeah.
I got 6:30 now.
Now you better check your clock. Anyway, we'll move on. We'll move on to Mr. Camp at this point in time. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here. I have 3 areas that I wanted to cover briefly, if I can, and let me begin with kind of the easiest one first. I think. Just wonder if you can give us an update on the progress we're making on our polar icebreaker.
Thanks for the question, Mr. Camp. We're making significant progress on the polar icebreaker. As you know, the Vancouver shipyard has been awarded the non-combat package of the National Shipbuilding Procurement Strategy. We recently signed a contract with Vancouver Shipyard to move ahead the design of the polar icebreaker. Last year, we awarded a contract to STX Marine from Vancouver to actually do the design of our polar icebreaker. Last fall, we actually tested a hull form in the tank at the National Research Council in St. John's, Newfoundland. We spent 3 months working in the ice tank there, testing various hull forms and propulsion configurations. We're getting some very exciting results, having some world-class design firms, having the shipyard in Vancouver's input into the design and constructability of the polar, we're very much on track with that project to deliver that ship. It's a fantastic opportunity for us and a huge asset for Canada as our flagship.
Good. Thank you very much for that. When the Commissioner was here, we heard a little bit about some of the kind of the background about the realignment of the search and rescue resources in the Port of Vancouver, specifically that the Coast Guard had reviewed all of your programs and particularly how you had delivered search and rescue resources in across Canada, and decided that there would be a more efficient but as effective network in Vancouver without Kitsilano, but with the addition of some other resources. And I've always felt that the right question is, you know, are we confident that that new network is going to work? Is it going to, you know, are the assumptions right that that decision was based on? And so now that we've had you know, almost a few weeks with that new network in place, although we don't have the inshore rescue boat yet, can you just tell us your view on that? Have there been some incidents, we understand? Can you tell us how they were handled and whether you are feeling like the new network is working?
Thank you, Mr. Camp. When discussing search and rescue, I think it's critical to understand that there's no one asset, no one element of the program that ensures a safe rescue. We are very confident in the decision that's been made, and I think the system, and SAR is a system of systems that is in place, is effective. There have been a few incidents over the last few days, the largest one being yesterday with the rescue of 2 people out of the water, and the system worked exactly as it should. A Mayday call was relayed to our Marine Communication Center in Victoria. It took the information that it should in the way it always does, professional, calm. It took the information, assured the 2 individuals in the fishing vessel that we would have assets on scene shortly. Called the JRCC. They did exactly what they should do. They analyzed the situation. They looked at the assets that were available, tasked 2 vessels of opportunity, tasked RCM SAR, the auxiliary, and tasked the hovercraft in Sea Island. The hovercraft was underway in 5 minutes. This was 5:15 in the morning. So they get up, get dressed, and they're gone, exactly as we expect them to. They got on scene before the tug that was in the area was able to deploy its life raft. They rescued the 2 individuals, got them on board, and transported them directly from the hovercraft ashore to the ambulance. The system works exactly as we expect it to. And we are very proud of that rescue that was effected yesterday in Vancouver, and we're proud of the work that the Coast Guard crews are doing in the Vancouver area.
Okay, thank you for that, and appreciate the confidence that we can look forward to that system effectively delivering those services. Let me ask a question on a different topic as the final question, I think, because I think this question was raised in the House a few days ago, and I'm not sure we got it in 35 seconds got an answer, but my understanding is that this is the year that we need to submit our submission to under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea on the continental shelf, and I know we've been doing a lot of work on that, and we'll see resources in the main estimates, I think, that have been used for that. Are we still on track to deliver, and if you can share any more about that process, and once we do submit it, how long before that will be dealt with?
So thank you for the question. Indeed, this is the year that we'll be making our submission. And it is indeed in the main estimate, so there are some resources in this fiscal year and some resources for the next few years, and I'll explain that as well. It's been 10 years' work to prepare Canada's submission. Basically what it's about is identifying the footprint of our continental shelf. The work that's underway is for the Atlantic and the Arctic. It's been a joint effort between our department, our hydrography group, and NRCan, Natural Resources Canada, the GSC group there, the Geological Survey of Canada, and Foreign Affairs. It's been a 10-year effort. Our 10 years is up in terms of having to make our submission in December of this year. Plans are in place, and we are confident that we will get our submission in to be able to move that forward. You've seen media reports that suggest that we're looking at an area the size approximately of the prairie provinces to add to Canada's continental shelf. It is a very substantial piece of territory. It does speak to specific rights to the bottom and resources on the bottom. You asked as well when it will get heard. We have until December to do the submission. We know that the Commission is a number of years behind in terms of their looking at submissions. So there's a bunch of submissions that are piled up. We anticipate it'll probably be 5 or 6 years before we have to defend our submission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. McCauley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and welcome. Number one, the main estimates involve a decrease of $16.7 million and related to the implementation of the new aquaculture initiative. Could you just give us an idea of what this is all about? Also, as has been indicated, the Sustainable Aquaculture Program is cut by $17 million. Why is it being cut near in half? What you indicate if it's not, what programs would be affected if that funding is not put back in place? I would also like to ask you, is there a plan to expand the salmon farming open net industry on the west coast of this country? Is there a plan to expand the salmon open net concept across the country? Thank you.
So with respect to the program, as I mentioned, the budget allocation is one that was provided to the department as a 5-year time frame. The 5-year time frame comes to an end at the end of this fiscal year. It sunsets. If the government chooses to not renew the program and extend it as part of its budgetary process, there would be 4 program areas that would be affected. The first is those activities we undertake now to build and expand and improve the regulatory framework and environment for the management of the aquaculture sector. The second major program area that would be affected is our science work with respect to aquaculture, which is approximately half the program's current financial allocations. Sorry, did I get there? The third part of the program that would be affected is what we call innovation and market access, which funds technology development and sustainability with respect to the sector. And the fourth element of the program that would be affected is our sustainability reporting initiative, which seeks to report on the sustainability of the sector overall. All of those entail people, activities, a whole variety of things. It's approximately half of the department's resources that are currently allocated to aquaculture would be lost if that program were to disappear. The department obviously would have some significant challenges to address in terms of how we would move forward with aquaculture in that environment, in that context, but we would have to work our way through that. We would be in a position to make some sort of decisions and so on as to how we would do that once we receive whatever's in the budget. At this point, we're planning on a roughly status quo track. If things were to change, well, then obviously we would adjust. Second part of your question, I think, has to do with the use of open net pen activities in British Columbia. The department is a regulator and a manager of aquaculture. We don't have an expansion plan. It's not our role. We're not the industry. The industry will come forward with whatever proposals it has. The department will treat those as they do any other regulatory activity. If people choose to submit proposals for expansion in activities in British Columbia, they'll be treated through our normal regulatory process. We don't have something in place that says we're proposing that the industry expand in a particular way or time and place. It's not our role to do that.
Across the country?
Sorry, the third part of the question, in terms of across the country, as you may know, our regulatory role in British Columbia is rather different than in other parts of the country as a result of some jurisprudence in BC. The federal government has a substantially different role in British Columbia. We have a whole regulatory regime in place that reports up to the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans. In the rest of the country, the jurisdiction over aquaculture is shared between the federal and provincial governments and so on. And so if we had expansion opportunities or proposals, I should say, elsewhere in the country, they'd be treated through that system as well.
Thank you very much. Does DFO have planned to put money aside to implement any of the regulations of the Cohen Commission? If so, how much? And if not, why not? And like I would wonder too, on your response, it would indicate to me that there is a possibility of the expansion of the open net industry on the west coast of this country. And if I understand correctly, the Cohen Commission has indicated, I know it's just one area, but they've indicated quite clearly that this should stop. I'd like your comment on that, because you've indicated that if the proposals come forward, you have a process to deal with that. There's nothing to say that the expansion will not take place. Is that correct?
So I'd answer that in two parts. The first, just to make sure that on the resources question, which we got into a little bit, the program for aquaculture in British Columbia is funded through A-based resources. So the implementation of the Pacific Aquaculture Regulation will continue regardless of any changes made with respect to the sustainable aquaculture program. When the government moved into that regulatory role, resources were provided to implement the regulation, to put in place new enforcement officers, to put in place regulatory liaison officers, I guess is the best way to put it, and so on. So the ability that the department has to manage the sector effectively and discharge its responsibilities in British Columbia will not be affected by any resource changes around the sustainable aquaculture program, with the possible exception that some of our science resources are tied into that. But in terms of the regulatory agenda, it will proceed. More specifically, with respect to the references to Cohen, the government, as we mentioned, as the minister rather mentioned the other day, is continuing to analyze the recommendations of that report. It has not formed its conclusions as to how it will go forward on all of the recommendations, including those related to aquaculture.
Thank you very much. But in fact, what you're telling me is that there's no funding allocated to implement the Cohen Commission report. Also, you're telling me that if, I know it's the Sustainable Aquaculture Program has been cut, but it's up to the department to decide and the government to decide whether there will be an expansion of the open net industry on the west coast of this country. There's absolutely nothing, or there's nothing to stop that. Looking at what the Cohen Commission has recommended, I know it's just in one specific area, but if you look at it, it's really, it could play up right across the coast of British Columbia. So it's, I would just wonder, basically what you're telling us then is that if there's a proper application in place for more open net in the salmon industry, it could well be approved. Is that correct?
Well, again, I would emphasize that the government hasn't reached its conclusions with respect to Cohen, and so the Cohen Commission recommendations, including those related to aquaculture. So I just want to make clear, when you indicate what I'm telling you, what I'm trying to make sure I tell you is that the government still hasn't reached its conclusions with respect to Cohen, and so I wouldn't want to convey any suggestion the government will accept, reject, endorse those recommendations. That will come forward. Insofar as the question about the future of aquaculture, again, from my point of view, from our point of view, essentially what will happen is the industry will determine whether it wishes to submit applications for expansion or not. That'll be a business decision they make, and we'll analyze those when they come. Thank you very much.
At this time, we will suspend our sitting, and we will resume immediately following the votes, approximately 12:10, 12:15 range. So, we'll see all members back here shortly. Thank you. call this meeting back to order. Thank the officials for your patience. We have our next round will be a 5-minute round, and we'll start off with Mr. Donnelly. Oh, sorry, Mr. Toon.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're as surprised as I am.
Right, thank you for coming. I'll have first. My first question is going to be on the environmental lakes area, ELA. It was announced that you wanted that the government wants to shut it down. There was some talk about third-party management, that third parties would perhaps take possession of the ELA, that the government would actually cede them. What are the discussions regarding that possibility, and is the government prepared to keep liability, responsibility for liability, if there were to be a secession of the ELA?
So thank you for the question. Indeed, the government did announce that we would not be operating the experimental lakes area going forward, and we did express a hope that we would be able to identify another operator from universities or non-government organizations who would wish to be the operator. What I can tell you is we are in discussions with potential operators now. We're in discussions with Ontario as well, who is the fee simple owner of the area. I'm not at liberty to say what's happening in terms of those discussions. The issue of liability is something that we are talking about. The government's been clear, however, that we've given our notice that we will no longer be involved in operating it as of September 1st this coming year.
If the government would retain liability, what kind of costs are we looking at? What would be the projections there?
The issue of liability is it's a complex one. There's a number of issues. One is the actual lakes themselves and ensuring that they come back are remediated to a natural state. There's a number of facilities also that are in the areas that we've built, and then there's boats and there's docks and slips and all those types of things. So there's different types of issues. We are talking to Ontario right now about remediation and what will be required for remediation if there's not an operator. And we're starting to take some action in terms of ensuring that it's brought back, if there is an appropriate operator, to a proper state for a new operator.
Thank you. Another question then on another subject. Concerns have been raised by the DFO that they'll no longer be conducting environmental assessments, proposed aquaculture sites. Once the changes to the Fisheries Act and the Navigable Waters Act are implemented. At the same time, the department has the mandate to protect wild fish. So how do you expect to be able to carry out your mandate if you're no longer conducting environmental assessments?
Excuse me. I guess there are a couple of things to point out. First is that the regulatory regime that's in place for aquaculture today will continue into the future. Environmental assessments of aquaculture sites will be conducted in two different ways. Again, we always have to distinguish the British Columbia versus the, I don't want to be pejorative, but the rest of the country. It's a verbal shorthand, take it for that. But essentially in British Columbia, the assessment of the environmental implications of all aquaculture sites will be considered as part of the regulatory process. And so the provisions that historically have been addressed via the provincial and federal environmental assessment processes in British Columbia will be addressed through the Pacific Aquaculture regulatory process that's in place there now. And those will not be changed, and those have not been changed, rather, by the Fisheries Act. On the East Coast, where we are getting into environmental assessments of aquaculture sites, essentially what will happen in the future going forward is the provincial process remains in place. To the extent that there are federal interests in some of the projects insofar as where they're located, the Act would be triggered, or triggered is not really the correct term now, but would be applied. But the manner in which the assessments are undertaken in the future will be somewhat different. As you probably are aware, under the Environmental Assessment Act, aquaculture is not listed as one of the projects on the schedule. And so it's our expectation that the majority of the environmental assessment work will be done via the province in question, depending on where it is. And we will work through the existing permitting mechanisms that are in place to address the federal obligations.
Thank you very much. We'll move on now to Ms. Davidson.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair, and thanks for being back with us again today. On Tuesday, I'd asked the question about number 3 in the supplementary estimates, and it related to the $1.5 million that was spent on implementing the Asian Carp Initiative. We also know that we do have or have had for several years, a fairly robust lamprey eel program. Can anybody tell me where it's funded from, and if, in fact, there are any changes to it, or is it contemplated to continue at the same level?
So thanks for the question. The Sea Lamprey Control Program is one that Canada has been involved in jointly with the United States for many years. The primary objective of the program to minimize sea lamprey populations in support of fish community objectives in the Great Lakes, like the rehabilitation of trout populations. We use a integrated pest management approach that includes stock assessment to determine abundance and distribution of lampreys. We use a lampricide program and control to eliminate and reduce larval populations. And we do the construction of spawning barriers and traps in the Great Lakes tributaries to reduce or eliminate the reproduction of sea lampreys. Since 2006, DFO has spent $8 million. This is expected to continue. There's no plan for any change in that regard. It's $8 million a year, I should be clear, in partnership with the U.S.
Okay, thanks very much. Now, going back again to the supplementaries, in number 13, excuse me, it says transfer to the environment to provide accommodation for Fisheries and Oceans employees housed in environments facilities to support the implementation of the species at risk. So I understand that the departments do work together, they collaborate, that they hopefully are trying to find savings through joint efforts. And I think we've seen it in other departments as well. We've seen it in Shared Services Canada, and I'm hoping that this is something along the same line. So I'm wondering if anybody could talk about the issue and how do DFO and Environment Canada or any other department that you might work with work together on programs and projects to and provide examples perhaps of how that saves taxpayer dollars.
I'll talk about the first portion of your question. The actual transfer is really in relation to the renewed funding that we received for species at risk. Last year there was funding that was sunsetting, and through budget 2012 we actually received $24.6 million over 3 years. This is obviously, as you mentioned, this is something that we deliver in partnership with other departments, environment being one of them. When we receive new funding in such cases, we divide the funding up of the envelope to the best of our capacities of where it should go, which department is assuming which cost. In this particular case, the transfer is done because we basically owed $46,000 to Environment Canada because we are using their facility. So at the initial stage when we divided the envelope, that was not taking into account. So we were just rebalancing the books as to who's covering which cost.
So are there, does the department actively look for ways to increase efficiencies in this manner with collaborating with the other departments?
Yeah, I'll give you a short answer so I don't get beeped again, because it's actually a very large topic. But essentially, on specifically with respect to the Species at Risk program, the hub of your question, essentially we work very closely with Environment Canada, and Environment Canada in its role both as Environment Canada, so to speak, and the minister responsible for parks. So it's really a three-departmental thing, even though it's two ministers. Essentially, the Species at Risk program is jointly managed by the three agencies. We are working at a series of levels to make sure that our programs align, that we don't have conflicting regulations, policies, programs, that sort of thing. We've got 3 programs that we actually administer jointly to transfer funds to project proponents doing work on the ground and on the landscape. So again, single administration really for almost like 3 programs, but a central administrative hub. We've got a whole series of things that we do in collaboration with respect to enforcement of the Act so that our enforcement officers don't trip over each other. It's a nice urban myth to say, you know, I had an enforcement officer from Fisheries one day and Environment another day and CFIA another day and so on. We work very hard to make sure that actually doesn't happen. And I would just simply say or conclude by saying that that kind of experience actually is replicated in quite a number of other domains. Species at Risk is arguably the best example of it, but by no means is it the only area where we work closely with other federal departments to achieve financial savings and program efficiencies.
Thank you very much. Mr. Tremblay.
Merci. J'aimerais poursuivre un peu la conversation.
Thank you. I'd like to continue perhaps with the conversation we were having last time we were here. I'm wondering if you could tell us today whether or not you're going to follow the recommendations of the Official Languages Commissioner on the Search and Rescue Center, particularly the recommendation which until the recommendations 1 through 4 have been implemented.
Recommendations of the Commissioner for Official Languages very seriously as we plan the consolidation of the MRSC Quebec into JRCCs in Halifax and Trenton. We will not proceed until we are certain that the level of safety provided to mariners now will be unchanged and that we can meet the official language requirements as laid out by both our clients but also as defined by the Commissioner for Official Languages. So we haven't closed the MRC Quebec yet. Because we're not going to do it precipitously. We are waiting until we are certain the level of bilingual staff is available. It is now in Halifax. We continue to staff for Trenton. And Trenton is a bit delayed because we also have to build a new joint rescue center, and we're doing that currently. So plans are underway, but we will not do it until we are confident the level of service will continue.
Donc, si j'ai bien compris, vous allez respecter les...
So if I understand you correctly, you do intend to respect and implement the recommendations of the Official Languages Commissioner?
Merci. Est-ce que vous allez demander...
Thank you very much. Are you going to ensure that the linguistic requirements are strengthened compared to what's going on today?
Halifax have already been increased to a bilingual level of CBC. They were BBB. So yes, we have raised the levels already in Halifax, and we will do so in Trenton.
Mr. Chisholm.
Thank you. I noticed that the ocean forecasting is down $5 million, and oceans management is also down from previous expenditures and estimates. I wondered if you could explain the rationale for this decrease.
Yeah, a big part of it, the oceans forecasting is down by $4.7 million, and the larger part of that decrease is actually due to reallocation within the program activities. Over $3.3 million has been transferred to a new program activity that you would find under the Climate Change Adaptation Program. So it's basically during the year we move money around, and this is a new program activity. We received money through budget 2011 for that purpose, and based on what a program activity is, as we follow the guidelines from Treasury Board Secretariat, we created that new program activity because it's really a standalone. So there was money moved. Okay. So it's not money decreased, it's really moved to a different program activity.
Okay. The Commissioner of the Environment in the fall 2012 report raised significant concerns regarding Canada's ability to meet its UN obligation to protect 10% of our coastlines by 2020. I wondered if you would indicate the government's commitment to provide sufficient funding to protect marine and coastal areas.
The department is continuing with its work with respect to the establishment of marine protected areas. As you may know, there are 8 marine protected areas that are currently in place, and there are areas of interest that are under development for 7 additional areas. In addition to that, there is work that is underway with other federal partners in the provinces to establish a network of marine protected areas to look at how all the various efforts that we're doing, whether it's marine parks or marine protected areas, undertakings by provinces, how that contributes towards Canada achieving the goal of 10%. It's not a commitment as much as it was a target to work towards, and I think that the environmental commissioner noted that the department was on track with its capacity to continue to move forward towards that target with the resources that the department has to develop marine protected areas.
Thank you, Mr. Chisholm. Mr. Sopak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to follow up on the idea of the salmon stamp that is being salmon stamp fee increase that is being requested by anglers in BC. I gather that that's the case. A comment I'd like to make, however, as well, before I get to my question, is the anglers are about the only user group of fish who actually ask to be taxed to conserve fish. And I think it's a tribute to the angling community that constantly, and the hunting community as well, that they are constantly asking that their license fees be increased and that money be earmarked for the conservation of the fish and wildlife that they so cherish. So I would hope that the department pays that community the respect that they deserve given their track record in conservation. Too many other groups just talk about the environment, but the Anglers and Hunters of Canada actually deliver real on-the-ground environmental programming. So in terms of the a fee increase that the anglers are requesting, what would that generate in terms of funds?
Well, first, in terms of the Pacific Salmon Conservation Stamp, there is a similar program that's in place involving commercial harvesters in British Columbia, where they contribute, I believe it's on the order of $10 per harvester towards contribution either to the Pacific Salmon Foundation or, if they elect to the Tibuc Suzuki Society in British Columbia for the same purposes of conservation and restoration and so on. The proposals that have come to the department or to our minister have involved looking at taking an additional part of the fee that's currently being paid for the salmon stamp and contributing and using that to contribute to the monies that are provided to the Pacific Salmon Foundation. So it's really a fiscal question in terms of the government, whether it wants to decide to forego that revenue and to convert that into a contribution to provide to the foundation. There is also, of course, as you've noted, the possibility of increasing the price of the stamp with the proceeds of that increase being provided to the foundation as well. Right now, the salmon stamp is, I think, generating on the order of about $350,000 annually, and that amount is provided through a contribution to the Salmon Foundation.
Yeah, the analogous one is the Wildlife Habitat Canada, which receives all of the funds generated by migratory bird stamps. And again, it seems to me that's something we should be looking at. And again, when I think of the angling groups and the volunteerism that they do in terms of the projects, it's truly remarkable, their dedication to the resource. I'd like to follow up with Mr. Schwertfeger's comments regarding enforceable conditions of the habitat provisions. I assume, and I'd like a short answer here, that the department is able to issue standards and guidelines for certain types of quote-unquote smaller developments, such as stream crossings?
Under the terms of the new provisions of the Fisheries Act, it will be able to do that, so yes.
Okay. So an operator, let's say a road builder, a municipality, has a stream, let's say in where I live, a stream happens to be used by pike, which are the weakest swimming fish, as you know, and the guideline could redesign the crossing so that pike will be able to go through the culvert, and of course the design can be done in a certain way to let that happen. And then if that design was not followed, are you then able to enforce those conditions?
So the key will be that the prohibition remains in place, holas bolas across the country of Section 35. The guidelines that you're talking about will say, buddy, if you're planning to build a stream crossing in this case and you follow these standards, it's extremely likely that you will not violate the prohibition because you will not cause serious harm and so on. However, if we got to a scenario where Buddy says he's planning to do that, that happens, and his neighbors rat him out or something, he says, actually, that's not what he did, the department will be able to go in, and in that case, he will not have an authorization that we would be enforcing. Instead, what we'd be doing is saying, you told us, or you told the community you were going to behave in such a way as you would not violate the standards and guidelines. In fact, we have, and under a scenario like that, the department would still have the authority to go in and lay a charge with respect to violation of Section 35, as opposed to the authorization terms, because he wouldn't have one.
Thank
In terms of,
thank you very much.
Thank you.
So much. Mr. McCauley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Stringer, the experimental lakes area, it's my understanding it costs the Government of Canada approximately $2 million a year. Is that correct?
It's approximately correct.
What would it cost if you do not get somebody to take it over to completely shut it down?
As I said before, we're actually talking to Ontario about that. It will range in terms of if we do have a new operator, the sense is we'd need to do some remediation, which we believe would cost about $1 million. If we were to take down all the facilities, return it to nature, et cetera, it's a few more million than that. So it's nowhere near what's being reported in the media, but it is a few million.
Thank you very much. Mr. Swerdfager, is that correct?
I think you said Mr., right? Yes.
The minister was right.
Yeah.
In my question on the Sustainable Aquaculture Program, you talked about market access as one of the programs that would be cut back. First of all, it's my understanding that you spend money on promoting and marketing of salmon, and do you spend money promoting the market of lobster? Looking at the Lobster Council of Canada that was put in place a few years ago, and it's my understanding that some funding was put in place, and I think you're fully aware that the lobster market is very depressed at the moment. It's a specialty product that is not receiving the return to the fishermen that should be. I'd just like you to elaborate on that.
So the first part of your question I'll talk about with respect to the lobster. I may call on my colleagues. With respect to do we promote and market farm salmon, the answer to that question is no. The market access program component under the Sustainable Aquaculture Initiative is used to explore third-party certification, to contribute to the discussion around third-party certification standards. You're probably familiar with the Marine Stewardship Council. The flip side of it, so to speak, is the Aquaculture Stewardship Council. And there are actually, I just forget the exact number now, but approximately 25 aquaculture certification type initiatives. And so within the $17 million of the program, $200,000 was set aside to support efforts to develop the standards, procedures, protocols, and so on associated with the development of those standards. Insofar as our investments in the Lobster Council, I confess I don't have those numbers to hand. Maybe my colleagues would.
Yeah. First, I think, as you would know, the Department of Fisheries and Oceans does not have a mandate for promotion of fish or seafood products or aquaculture products, and that is a responsibility that's with the Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. But in terms of lobster, the department has been active, as have been the Atlantic provinces and Quebec, in supporting the formation of the Canadian Lobster Council, which came together in 2009. And we have provided financial contributions as seed money to that council since that period of time. In the current fiscal year for $20,000 to a total of $90,000 since 2009 for the council. That is, as you know, working with all segments of the lobster sector to develop standards and to promote Canadian lobster and to support the sustainability of lobster as well.
Thank you very much. In the supplementary estimate, $68,000 has been taken from the operational expenditures to provide a source of funds to establish business transformation and renewal secretariat of the Privy Council. What is this, and what is it all about?
Basically, a unit that was formed in PCO to overlook horizontal issues and see where savings could be generated from. So in order to set up that unit in PCO, departments were asked to contribute financially to cover the expenditures, including the salary expenses of that group. So basically, DFO's contribution to the setting up of that group is $111,000 a year. Our contribution for 12-13 is $68,000. So that's why there was a transfer done to PCO.
Thank you very much, Mr. McCauley. Mr. Donnelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Schwartberger, you mentioned you believe the cuts to the number of DFO or Habitat offices in the field would make the department more efficient. And I'm wondering if you have considered those in the field or others in DFO, in fact, who are very concerned with these cuts. In terms of the Fisheries Act, changes have, I would submit that these changes have created more uncertainty. And in fact, I'm hearing from the development community and even in some instances from industry that uncertainty exists. And there was discussion about consultation, and I think there's a number who feel they haven't been consulted on these changes, including the regulation that you referenced earlier, and especially First Nations. But I do want to mention, and unfortunately I don't have enough time to ask questions on those. I do want to get to my question, but there was also another comment about the promotion of aquaculture, and I'm just looking on the website where you have the National Aquaculture Strategic Action Plan, which I believe you work with the Canadian Council of Fisheries and Aquaculture Ministers, and it says right on here, strengthening sustainable aquaculture development in Canada, and that Canada has considerable untapped potential in aquaculture, and the National Strategic Action Plan was developed to help Canada realize that potential. So it, and then goes on further comment that. So it's certainly a very confusing message that we're hearing here at the committee today, and given this document that essentially you could see or interpret as promoting the industry. Certainly Cohen in his deliberations also commented about the confusing mandate of DFO to promote aquaculture and at the same time protect or conserve wild salmon. And one could argue about that being the reason for the Cohen Commission in the first place. However, my question, just because I'm unfortunately I don't have enough time to ask all those questions, I'd like to talk about the closure of Beep Fremp, the Burrard Inlet Environmental Management Program, and the Fraser River Action Management Program. So on February 28th of this year, Fremp and Beep announced that they'd be closing their doors on March 31st of this year, and they cite that due to the federal government cutting $150,000 in funding to that program, which represents a significant portion of their $350,000 in annual operating budget. So this also, of course, follows on the department's significant cuts to habitat protection and staff and other offices. So I'm just wondering if you could comment on that, and then I do have another question about the Coast Guard.
As you've noted, this office is being closed. The DFO is a partner in that operation. One of 5 agencies that have been part of this initiative, and suffice to say, though, that this closure is not going to be something that will affect our posture in terms of the fish protection program, and we're not looking to reduce resources as a part of this.
Thank you. In the remaining time that I have, I'd like to just turn to the Kitsilano Coast Guard station closure. Ms. Thomas, it's my understanding that Ms. Vija Horax, who was the Assistant Commissioner Western Region, was fired, and that Gary Siddons was brought in from the East Coast to shut the facility down. I'm wondering if you have a quick comment on that, if that's the case or not.
I can tell you absolutely that Assistant Commissioner Vija Horax was not fired. She is on leave. She has chosen to leave the Coast Guard after a long and illustrious service in the public service, many years with the Coast Guard, but she was in absolutely no way fired.
Okay, thank you. And officials have been reassuring members of this committee that the closure of the Kitsilano Coast Guard station is having no impact on Coast Guard response times. However, the recent incidents in Vancouver have raised serious concerns, primarily that response times would be much quicker if the Kit station was still open. In response to yesterday's early morning incident in the sunken fishing vessel, the minister claimed RCM SAR responded in 11 minutes. However, a spokesperson for RCM SAR confirmed the auxiliary crew arrived on scene after the hovercraft, which came from Sea Island Station. There are also reports that the Assistant Commissioner of the Coast Guard for Western Region stepped down or went on leave after refusing to close the Kit station on short notice. And given the outstanding concerns of many British Columbians that the closure of the Kitsilano station is in fact putting lives at risk, I'd like to move my motion that because the safety of Canadians will be compromised with the closure of the Kitsilano Coast Guard station, the busiest station in Canada, and because there was a lack of consultation with stakeholders and experts, the Standing Committee on Fisheries and Oceans immediately study the impact of the potential consequences of the closure of the Kitsilano Coast Guard station. And I so move, Mr. Chair.
Donnelly.
I do have copies in both official languages.
No, we do. We have copies as well. Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. It's been moved by Mr. Donnelly, and proper notice was given, and even with the topic today, that notice wasn't required, but anyhow, it's a topic at hand. So it's been moved by Mr. Donnelly that because of the safety of Canadians will be compromised with the closure of the Kitsilano Coast Guard station, the busiest station in Canada, and because there was a lack of consultation with stakeholders and experts, the Standing Committee on Fisheries and Oceans immediately studied the impact of the potential consequences of the closure of the Kitsilano Coast Guard station. It's been moved by Mr. Donnelly. On the question, Mr. Camp.
Mr. Chair, as is our practice, I would move that we would go in camera for the consideration of this motion.
It's been moved by Mr. Camp that the committee go in camera for consideration of this motion. Those in favor? Those opposed? Motion carried. So we will suspend at this time so the officials can leave, and committee will take into consideration this motion. Thank you.